Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shreyasi and today we are going to talk about how the State of Israel was created. The Middle East has an incredibly rich history, and while the ancient history of the State of Israel is fascinating too, we are going to focus mainly on the modern history and how the State of Israel as it exists came into being. But for now, some background. Israel has traditionally been known as the Holy Land because it is holy for Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and the Baha'i faith. King Solomon was responsible for the creation of a very strong Hebrew kingdom. But when his son died, the kingdom was split into two: the kingdom of Israel with its capital at Samaria and the kingdom of Judea with its capital at Jerusalem. The kingdom of Israel was destroyed by 720 BCE with the invasion of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, while the kingdom of Judea saw the massacre of hundreds of thousands of Jews with the invasion of the Roman Republic. But it was after the failed revolt of Bar Kokhba of Jews against the Roman Republic that the population of Jews greatly reduced, with killings and expulsions, and the Roman province of Judea was named Syria-Palestine. However, the small Jewish presence that was left behind would go on to compose Mishnah and a part of the Talmud, holy Jewish texts. In 1492, after being expelled from Spain, Jews made Palestine their home. In the beginning of the 19th century, Jews mainly from Lithuania, known as Perushim, arrived in Israel, which then was Ottoman-ruled Syria. In 1882, following pogroms or massacre and expulsion in Eastern Europe, Jews arrived in Palestine. A smaller number of them also arrived from Yemen. This was known as the first Aliyah, or the first migration influenced by the Zionist movement. But life was difficult, and facing widespread hunger and disease, many of them left Palestine quickly. However, the ones who did stay back created the foundation for Jewish settlement in Israel. Second Aliyah. Aliyah, as I have mentioned, is the emigration of Jews to Palestine. This emigration was spurred by growing anti-Semitism, pogroms, and lack of economic opportunities for Jews. However, Palestine itself had very limited opportunities, and again, gripped with hunger and disease, many Jews left within a few months. This, however, was also a very highly influential wave of emigration because it led to the revival of Hebrew. Tel Aviv was established in 1909 as the first Hebrew city, and it also led to the development of Hashomer, a Jewish defense organization in Palestine. On November 2, 1917, British Foreign Secretary Lord Arthur James Balfour wrote a letter to Lord Walter Rothschild, a British Jew. The contents of this letter became known as the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing support for the establishment for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. But why did the British do it? There could be a few reasons. First, it could have been because of lobbying by prominent Zionist leader Chaim Weizmann, who was responsible for the invention of a process for producing acetone, which was used in the manufacture of explosives critical to the Allied war effort in World War I. Second reason could be that Britain needed the United States to enter the war, and some officials were perhaps guided by their anti-Semitic belief that American Jews had a lot of influence and showing support for their homeland would make them lobby the American government to join the war against Germany. And the third reason could be that as religious Christians, the leaders truly believed that the Holy Land was the spiritual home of Jews. The Balfour Declaration would go on to have far-reaching consequences and I'll get to it in a minute. Third Aliyah. This wave of Jewish emigration to Palestine, mostly from Eastern Europe, was because of the Balfour Declaration and the Russian Revolution, which led to another wave of pogrom, which left hundreds of thousands of Jews dead or homeless. Until the end of the World War, Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire. And since the Ottoman Empire had joined the Ottoman-German alliance, the Ottoman Empire was partitioned after World War I. Here in this map you can see the partition. This was done according to the Treaty of Sèvres, a 1920 treaty signed between the allies of the World War I and the Ottoman Empire. The treaty ceded large parts of Ottoman territory to France, the United Kingdom, Greece and Italy, and created large occupation zones in the Ottoman Empire. But in 1916, France and Britain had already made a secret agreement to mutually decide their spheres of influence for when the Ottoman Empire gets partitioned. It was known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and as a result, Britain and France began to dominate what once was the Ottoman Empire. Here, it gets even more complicated. The British had promised a national Arab homeland in the area of Greater Syria in exchange for supporting the British against the Ottoman Empire. This was done through a series of letters known as the Mcmohan-Hussein correspondence. Needless to say, the Arabs felt betrayed. The British mandate for Palestine was a League of Nations mandate that called for British administration of the territories of Palestine and Transjordan, or simply Jordan, that you can see on the map. Both of these territories had been conceded by the Ottoman Empire following the end of World War I in 1918. The region came to be known as Mandatory Palestine until 1948 when the British ended their mandate. And here's where the Balfour Declaration gets important. In Mandatory Palestine, according to the Balfour Declaration, a national home for the Jewish people was to be established alongside Palestinian Arabs. The fourth and fifth Aliyah. Meanwhile, Jews continued to emigrate to Palestine with growing anti-Semitism in Europe. The fifth Aliyah was characterized by mass migrations from Germany caused by the rise of Hitler and his Nazi party, which marked intense anti-Semitism and persecution of Jews. Seen here are Jews arriving at the Jaffa port. By the end of 1940, 250,000 Jews had made their way to Palestine. As the Jews kept coming to Palestine, the Palestinian Arabs revolted in 1936 against the British administration of Palestine Mandate, demanding Arab independence and the end of the policy of open-ended Jewish immigration and land purchases with the stated goal of establishing a national Jewish home. So in response to the revolt, the British government released a policy paper known as the White Paper of 1939. The paper called for the establishment of a national Jewish home in an independent Palestinian state within 10 years. But at the same time, it also limited Jewish immigration to only 75,000 for 5 years, and ruled that further immigration would then be determined by the Arab majority. This, in essence, closed the doors to Jews trying to flee Europe, since legal immigration was not an option for Jews fleeing Nazi Germany and even Holocaust survivors. Illegal immigration under a clandestine operation named Aliyah Bet began. However, many of those ships were intercepted by the British Royal Navy and many refugees died in the sea or were sent to detention camps. It will be important to mention Haganah and Irgun here, because both played an important role in Aliyah Bet. Haganah was the main paramilitary organization of the Jewish people in what was then Mandatory Palestine from 1920 to 1948. Irgun was an underground organization founded by a few commanders of Haganah and developed largely in opposition to British law. They rejected the policy of restraint practiced by Haganah. After World War II, Britain faced Jewish anger over immigration limits and Arab anger over immigration itself. Haganah, the Jewish paramilitary organization who had cooperated with the British efforts in World War II thus far, but when Britain refused to cancel the 1939 limits on Jewish immigration, they began an open, organized struggle against British rule alongside Irgun and Leahy. Meanwhile, Irgun had already been carrying out an armed struggle against the British since the issuance of the White Paper restricting Jewish immigration. In 1944, Irgun declared war against the British. It attacked and blew up government offices, military installations, and police stations. The Irgun carried out its most infamous attack on the King David Hotel in 1946, killing about 91 people. It was a response to Operation Agatha, where the British had conducted multiple widespread raids on the Jewish agency. Seen here is a room after it was raided for weapons. Over 2,700 individuals were arrested, including future Prime Minister Moshe Sharett. The insurgency continued throughout 1946, and the British were convinced that they could not continue in Palestine. Jews refused any solution without a Jewish state in Palestine, and Arabs refused any solution with a Jewish state and sought a unified Palestine. So in 1947, Britain referred the Palestine issue to the United Nations. The United Nations General Assembly Resolution 181 called for the partition of the British-ruled Palestine Mandate into a Jewish state and an Arab state. Here you can see the UN plan with the area in blue to be the Jewish area and the area in orange to be the Arab area. It was approved on November 29, 1947. The resolution was accepted by the Jews in Palestine but rejected by the Arabs in Palestine as well as the Arab states. Almost immediately, violence broke out in Palestine. The plan could not be implemented. The situation escalated into a civil war. British Colonial Secretary Arthur Creed Jones announced that the British mandate would end on 15th May 1948, at which point the British would evacuate. On 14th May 1948, the day before the British mandate was to expire, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, declared the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel. David Ben-Gurion would also go on to become the first Prime Minister of the State of Israel. On 15th May 1948, the civil war turned into a war between Israel and the Arab states. The war was fought against Lebanon and Syria in the north, Iraq and Transjordan, or simply Jordan, in the east, and Egypt, assisted by Sudan, in the south. In the end, Israel not only retained its own share, but captured a significant amount of the area allotted to the Palestinian Arab state. Jordan controlled West Bank and Egypt controlled the Gaza Strip. Arab states signed armistice agreements with Israel. The Haganah was renamed the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, and Irgun members were absorbed into the IDF. In Israel, the war is remembered as its War of Independence. In the Arab world, it came to be known as Nakba, meaning catastrophe. This is how the State of Israel was created. However, the Israeli-Palestine conflict continues to this day. The 1956 Suez Crisis, the 1967 Six-Day War, the 1973 Yom Kippur War, 1982 Lebanon War, to name the major ones. India recognized Israel in 1950, but only formally established relations with Israel in 1992. If you want to know more about India-Israeli relations or Indo-Palestine relations, comment below. And if you liked my video, do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button. I'll be back with another interesting topic really soon, so stay tuned. And as always, thanks for watching.